then the original provider, of course, can't get the retainer payment because the person was still able to get the service. But I'm not aware of that circumstance happening that much.
So we have a comment. I hope that service coordinators are making sure that their monitoring really focuses on ensuring providers are not imposing blanket restrictions. And
there are a number of service coordinators on this call, so.
Thank you for that comment. Director Reese, can you send me an invitation or an invite to that?
So there's a group of people who have been working together, and the invitation has gone to that group of people, and they've really had a number of conversations already. So it is a group that is a fairly well mixed group, I think, representing provider agencies, a person we support, DDS staff, and advocates. And so we're not expecting to expand that group, and DC Health, sorry. We're not expecting to expand that group. I'm hoping to have our final meeting next week.
Okay, and we had typed some information into the chat box, but for those of you who are on the line, this is just information that I think would be good to share with everyone regularly. Census, the deadline to complete the census is September 30th. So if people haven't done that yet, they should go to census.gov or call 267-780-2600. They can also visit the site or call if they are not sure if they completed it or not. Regarding voting, all registered voters will receive a ballot in the mail automatically. There will also be early voting and election day voting in person. People can visit dcboe.org to check their voter status and for more information.
And if I could just say, because, we got those notices at my house, and I had a couple of people who were living in my house and are not there anymore, and they got the notice. And so what the notice says is you will be receiving a ballot at this address. If you need an absentee ballot mailed to another address, please give us that address and return this. If you're, and that was the one I was filling out, so I don't remember the next question, but it was something like, if your address has changed, give us your updated address. So I would just urge our providers, if you're receiving those in the mail and you receive them for a person who doesn't live at that address anymore, coordinate with DDS so that we can connect, the person who perhaps has not updated their address with the Board of Elections to make sure that their ballot goes to the right place. So please, they came in the mail in DC more than a week ago. So anyone here in DC, please make sure that if you receive them for people who don't live there, that you check in with perhaps your service coordinator about where that person is now, so that we can make sure that any ballot they need gets to them at the home where they live.
And Carol, just to add on, we have another comment regarding the census and voting, just ensuring that residential providers are supporting people in completing the census, as well as getting their remote ballots turned in. Thanks, Carol. Any additional comments or questions? Please answer the 2 questions. Can you share the final 3 questions CMS asked on Appendix K? What are the sticking points other than retainer payments? So Director Reese, I can't hear you. You're muted.
Yeah, I'm muted. Sorry about that. So, they were not sticking points, just to be clear. As it goes up the chain, there have been there are just requests for more detail. So, one was to provide clarification where we had the different companion 1-to-1, 1-to-2, and actually just 1-to-2 and 1-to-3 rates. How were we distinguishing people that would get those? I think that they were coming from the perspective that it was sort of based on the person's individual needs rather than based on, that they were in a house where there were 2 people. And so that was the reason to establish that rate. Here we go. Other than that, it was like there was little language changes that they wanted. So anyone who's dealt with the federal government understands these kinds of things. It was not substantive from my perspective. It was, it was just clarifying language in a variety of places. Oh, we had incorrectly said 7 services rather than 6 under one thing, and someone caught that. Clarifying the issue of, that residential providers can provide the service as long as the person isn't getting a day service. We've clarified that statement at every level of review, I believe. So it was these kinds of things, but it is no sticking point. And the person that sent us, the person from CMS sent us sort of, here is the exact language that's an issue, and they want something like this. So, where we had said, retainer payments and cited to the Olmstead letter, they said you should instead cite to this frequently asked questions document, that kind of stuff. As I said, nothing substantive, I would say.
Okay. How many provider-run residences are currently quarantined?
I didn't look that information up today. It would be a fairly low number. We have 8 minutes, so I might be able to look it up quickly. I'll see if I can. But the other thing I could say is I can come prepared to answer that next week. But hold on one moment. Yeah, so I think it would probably be easier because I don't want to go through the data and give a wrong answer right now. One thing I do want to say about that is that one of the things DC Health advised us of yesterday is, well, we were aware of it last week, but they advised the provider leadership group yesterday that they will be issuing updated guidance on the CDC guidance regarding ending isolation has been updated. And so that may have an impact on when quarantines or, when provider locations that are so-called under quarantine, that would have an impact because the CDC has revised that guidance. You can go to the CDC's website and see how it's been revised. And DC Health, as soon as their updated guidance is approved, it will be published. But they are moving from a test-based strategy to a clinical-based strategy where the evaluations are done based on the health of the person with, as my reading, and you could read it and see for yourself, but by my reading, what the CDC has found after these, 5 million cases they've been following, is that there are people who continue to test positive but are no longer contagious. And this is the reason that their strategy is no longer a test-based strategy. For example, their recommendation, a person who tests positive and is asymptomatic should be isolated for 10 days. And if the person is isolated for 10 days and remains asymptomatic, then after the 10 days, they can end their isolation. So that complete guidance will be coming out from DC Health very soon. And that will have an impact so that providers know, our nurse consultants work with all of our provider agencies on the infection control and the decisions regarding quarantine. And so, that will be having an impact on the technical assistance that we provide in that regard.
Okay, do you think DC Health will update its guidance for ICFs based on that new CDC guidance? Currently, it recommends that people be tested weekly.
In our provider leadership meeting yesterday, the DC Health's description of that guidance was that is a recommendation. It's not how I read it, and I'm guessing whoever asked the question, it's not how you read it either. But from their perspective, that was a recommendation. And so we are sitting down with them to talk through a couple of those concerns, and they may be making that change. And that is not based on the updated CDC guidance. They're trying to catch people at the front end of testing positive. The weekly testing is not about testing someone who is positive until they become negative. It is about testing staff weekly to make sure that staff who come into a particular placement are not bringing COVID-19 in with them. It is a recognition that people, some people are asymptomatic, some are pre-symptomatic. A person may have COVID-19 before they develop symptoms. And so just screening for symptoms is not the most comprehensive way to ensure that you're not having someone with COVID come into a home. Weekly testing in the context of more than 50 placements, more than 1,000 staff is extremely challenging. One of the things when I walked through the ICF guidance, that and in just about, I think in every area except the testing, and DC Health's description of the testing, this is true as well, is that every area is a recommendation. It says we strongly discourage in some instances. But as you look at that guidance, what I'd really encourage you to do is to look at, after the recommendation is the reason for the recommendation. And that reason is based on the most current information and is likely not going to change. And really looking at the reason for each of their recommendations, the risk that's posed because of a particular thing. The reason for limiting visitors coming into the home is that we want to limit the number of people that someone comes into contact with. So reading through those pieces of that guidance is very helpful because it really helps for a provider to understand, even if it's a recommendation, How do you then come up with your decision based on the recommendation and, more importantly, the reasoning?
Okay, any other questions or comments? Please type that in the chat box.
So someone asked, was there any update on reopening day programs? I didn't get the exact number. Day programs have been asked to, and many of them have submitted their reopening plans to us, which are being, the first ones we received are being evaluated. And the provider should be getting a response, I believe, early next week. You could correct me if I'm wrong, Kirk. I think that the expectation was that 7 working days should be adequate to review them. Challenge being, of course, that there was a rush in the beginning. But once those are approved, then we can start having our interdisciplinary team meetings and planning for people who may resume some day services. I always get nervous when I hear someone refer to reopening day programs. Just to be really clear, we're not turning the clock back to February. We're making individualized decisions for each person about how they will spend their days, parts of which may be getting day services from the provider, parts of some days even, but it will really be focusing on what are the person's interests, what are their needs, what is it that the person wishes to engage in now, and how can we help them to do that in the safest way possible given the risks. And the day provider will be there at that conversation to be able to say, well, here's what we have available and how we could meet these parts of that need. I do see it's 1 o'clock. So we had our at DDS, we had our all staff meeting this week, which brought together just about 400 people virtually, which I thought was really wonderful. And we started that the way I'd like to end this, which is recognizing the tremendous efforts that people have made to protect the folks that we support, to continue to do their jobs, to really, go that extra mile through what has been just, our world's turned upside down, but providers have had to adjust to that on a dime. And, I'm certain I don't say enough how impressed I am with the work that our providers are doing, with the work that our direct support professionals on the front line are doing every single day. So I really want to recognize them. And then I'd like us, just for the last minute before we log off, to take a minute to remember all the folks that we have lost, and a minute to sort of think ahead to the hopeful days to come. So after 1:03, I will see you all next week. Thank you. Bye.